The alarm rang at exactly 6 a.m., sharp and loud, cutting through the quiet luxury of the Lekki apartment. Sade Adebayo was already awake. She lay still for a moment, staring at the white ceiling, listening not to the alarm, but to the sound of breathing beside her. Deep, slow, comfortable. The breathing of a man who had nowhere to be. She turned her head and looked at Colonel Adebayo, her husband of 7 years, slept like someone who had conquered the world the day before. His arm was stretched across the expensive mattress. The air conditioner hummed softly. Outside, Lagos was already awake. Horns, engines, ambition, but inside this bedroom, only one person felt the weight of morning. Sade reached over and turned off the alarm. Colonel did not move. She sighed quietly and sat up. Her body already ached. She had slept for barely 4 hours. The night before, she returned from Apapa after settling a delayed shipment for a client. Before that, she had chased payments, handled staff complaints, and argued with a supplier who tried to cheat her. Yet here she was, awake again, while the man who called himself her husband slept on. She stood up and walked into the bathroom. As water ran over her face, her eyes met her reflection. 34 years old. Tired eyes. Well-dressed life. Quiet suffering. When she returned, Colonel had only turned to the other side. Sade, he murmured without opening his eyes. What time is it? Morning, she replied calmly. Wake me when it's 8. She paused. 8 for what? She asked. He opened one eye. To eat. That was when something inside her shifted. Not anger. Not shock. Just a deep, heavy realization that settled in her chest like a stone. She dressed silently. A fitted blouse. A pencil skirt. Simple jewelry. Power dressed as elegance. Before leaving, she placed an envelope on the bedside table. Colonel finally sat up. What is that? He asked lazily. Money, she said. For food. Electricity units. Internet. He smiled. You are the best wife in Lagos. She looked at him. For a moment, she wanted to scream. To ask him when he planned to be a husband instead of a dependent. To ask him why love had turned into obligation. But she said nothing. She picked her bag. As she reached the door, Colonel called out, Don't forget, my uncle might come today. Tell the driver to wash the car. She stopped, turned slowly, and asked, Colonel, when was the last time you worked? He laughed. Why are you starting again so early in the morning? That laugh followed her out of the house. Outside, the sun rose over Lagos. Tall buildings. Fast lives. People chasing something. Sade stepped into her car. As the gate closed behind her, she whispered to herself, How long can one woman carry 2 adults? And for the first time, the question did not feel rhetorical. It felt like the beginning of an ending. By the time most people in Lagos were returning home to rest, Sade Adebayo was only just beginning her second shift. Her mornings started before sunrise and her nights ended long after midnight. This had become her normal, though she never remembered agreeing to such a life. She ran a small but fast-growing logistics business that moved goods between Lagos, Ibadan, and Port Harcourt. What began as a single delivery van 3 years ago had slowly grown into 5 trucks, 12 drivers, and a phone that never stopped ringing. That Tuesday night, she sat alone in her office in Sayulia. The fluorescent light above her flickered slightly, but she did not notice. Her eyes were fixed on a spreadsheet filled with numbers, fuel costs, driver allowances, delayed payments, and debts she was struggling to balance. Her phone buzzed. Madam, The Port Harcourt truck has broken down again, one of her drivers said nervously. Sade closed her eyes. Where exactly? She asked calmly. Near Elam. She took a deep breath. Send me pictures. Call the mechanic I gave you. I will handle it. She hung up and leaned back in her chair. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. At that same moment, Kunal was stretched out on their leather sofa in Lekki, watching a foreign series with the volume low. A plate of food rested on his stomach. The air conditioner cooled the room perfectly. He did not wonder where his wife was. He never did. Sade rubbed her temples and opened another message, this one from a client threatening to cancel a contract if deliveries were delayed again. She typed a careful response, promising resolution, professionalism, and commitment. Words she lived by. Words Kunal only spoke when it benefited him. Her business paid for everything. The rent in Lekki. The serviced car Kunal drove when he felt like going out. The groceries. The electricity bills. The internet he used all day. Even the clothes he wore when he attended weddings and told people he was working on something big. At 1:15 a.m., Sade finally locked her office door. The streets were quieter now, but not peaceful. Lagos never truly slept. As she drove home, her body felt heavy, but her mind refused to rest. She replayed the morning scene again, Kunal asking to be woken at 8 just to eat. When she entered the house, the television was still on. Kunal was asleep, remote in hand. She turned off the TV, removed her shoes, and went to the bedroom. As she changed quietly, her phone buzzed again. Another problem. Another call. Another solution only she could provide. She sat on the edge of the bed and handled it. Kunal turned in his sleep and muttered, Sade, don't forget breakfast tomorrow. She looked at him in the dim light. This was the man she rushed home to. This was the man resting on the results of her exhaustion. There was no embarrassment on his face, no urgency in his spirit, no hunger to contribute. She lay down at 2:38 a.m. Her alarm was set for 6 a.m. As sleep finally came, one quiet thought followed her into the darkness. She was no longer living as a wife. She was living as a provider. And Kunal was far too comfortable to notice the cost. Kunal loved mornings. Not because he had somewhere important to go, but because mornings were when Sade still believed in explanations. He sat at the dining table that Saturday, scrolling through his phone while Sade prepared tea. The house smelled of toasted bread and quiet tension. Kunal looked relaxed, freshly bathed, dressed in a crisp polo shirt as though he was about to step into something meaningful. Sade placed the cup in front of him. Thank you, he said warmly. You know, once this opportunity comes through, mornings like this will change for us. She did not respond immediately. She sat opposite him and watched his face. He spoke with confidence. Not arrogance, confidence. The kind that sounded convincing if you did not listen too closely. What opportunity? She asked. He smiled. I told you about it. The consulting idea. Big companies are moving into tech logistics now. I'm positioning myself. She stirred her tea slowly. Positioning yourself how? Kunal waved his hand. Networking. Research. Waiting for the right opening. You don't just jump into things blindly. She nodded, though her chest felt tight. Kunal had been positioning himself for 3 years. Every few months, there was a new version of the dream. Import-export. Crypto consulting. Real estate connections. Oil and gas partnerships in Port Harcourt. Each dream came with long explanations, foreign words, and promises of sudden wealth. None came with effort. No applications. No meetings. No rejections. Just waiting. You know, he continued, leaning back, people rush too much. That's why they fail. Me, I want to get it right. Sade looked at her hands. Calloused from steering wheels, phones, paperwork. From doing. I worked until almost 3 this morning, she said quietly. Kunal frowned. You stress yourself too much. That business will run you down. She laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That business is why we are here, she said. It is why you are drinking tea in a quiet house. He shifted uncomfortably. You're saying it like it's a bad thing. I appreciate you. But this is partnership. Everyone brings something. What do you bring? She asked. The question hung in the air. Kunal smiled again, slower this time. Vision. That was when she understood. Vision had become his currency. Dreams had replaced responsibility. Words had taken the place of action. And she had accepted it, because love made excuses feel reasonable. Later that day, Sade returned to her office. Kunal remained at home, making calls that led nowhere, watching motivational videos, writing notes that never turned into steps. As night fell, Sade reviewed invoices and paid salaries. She approved fuel costs and settled driver disputes. Each decision had weight. Each mistake had consequences. Kunal's dreams had none. At 10:40 p.m., he sent her a message. I believe everything will work out soon. She stared at the screen. For the first time, the message did not comfort her. It scared her. Because she was beginning to see that faith without effort was not hope. It was avoidance. And her marriage was quietly drowning in beautiful words that never moved. The gathering was meant to be simple. A family lunch in Ikeja to celebrate Kunal's aunt turning 60. Nothing serious. Nothing heavy. Just food, laughter, and relatives Sade had learned to smile through. She dressed carefully that morning. A soft blue dress. Modest. Elegant. Respectful. Kunal wore a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, looking every bit like a successful man. That was the problem. He always looked like one. They arrived late, as usual. The house was already full. Voices overlapped. Plates clinked. The smell of jollof rice and grilled meat filled the compound. As soon as they entered, greetings began. Sade. You are looking good. Kunal, my son. You people are enjoying Lagos life. Sade smiled politely. Kunal greeted everyone with confidence, shaking hands, laughing loudly, accepting praise he had not earned. They sat under a canopy in the backyard. Plastic chairs arranged in a circle. Bottled drinks sweating under the sun. At first, the conversation stayed light. Stories about children. Complaints about traffic. Jokes about aging. Then someone asked the question. It was Kunal's uncle, a retired civil servant with a voice that carried authority even in old age. Kunal, he said, leaning forward, remind me again, where are you working now? Sade felt it before it happened. Her stomach tightened. Kunal smiled easily. I'm in between things, sir. The uncle nodded slowly. In between what and what? A few heads turned. Kunal laughed. I'm consulting. You know how these things are. Big plans take time. Another aunt joined in, genuinely curious. Consulting where? Kunal shrugged. Different places. Lagos. Sometimes outside Lagos. Silence. Sade stared at her hands. The uncle cleared his throat. But you have been consulting for some time now, no? Cunnel laughed again. Louder this time. Uncle, patience is important in life. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Then the question came from the wrong person. So who is paying the rent in Lekki? A cousin asked, half joking. Before Sade could react, Cunnel answered. My wife, of course, he said cheerfully. She is the CEO of the house. Laughter erupted. Sade felt heat rise to her face. Her smile froze. People looked at her now not with admiration, but curiosity. Oh, Sade, an aunt said, so you are the one carrying this man? More laughter. Cunnel leaned back, enjoying it. She is strong. I'm lucky. Lucky. Sade wanted the ground to open. No one defended her. No one corrected him. No one said marriage was partnership. The moment passed as a joke, but it cut deeper than any insult. Later, as food was served, Cunnel continued laughing, telling stories, acting unbothered. Sade ate quietly, each spoonful heavy in her mouth. On the drive home, she finally spoke. You embarrassed me today. Cunnel looked surprised. How? You made my struggle sound like entertainment. He shrugged. You're too sensitive. Family jokes like that. They were laughing at me. No, he said casually. They were laughing at us. She turned and looked out the window. For the first time, she understood something painful. Cunnel was not ashamed. And that frightened her more than the laughter ever could. That night, sleep avoided Sade. Cunnel slept easily, as always. His breathing was steady, peaceful. The kind of peace that came from having nothing pressing on the mind. Sade lay beside him, staring into the darkness, her body tired but her thoughts restless. She remembered when love felt light. Cunnel had not always been like this. When they met, he was ambitious. Not rich, but driven. He spoke about growth, about building something meaningful, about being a man who provided. He had been the one who encouraged her to take risks. He once told her, I don't want a wife who depends on me completely. I want a partner. She smiled bitterly at the memory. Somewhere along the line, partnership had turned into dependence. She rolled onto her side and studied his sleeping face. He still looked like the man she fell in love with. Same strong jaw. Same confident smile when awake. But something invisible had changed. The hunger was gone. The urgency had disappeared. When did love become duty? She remembered the first time she covered his bills just for now. He had promised to repay her once things improved. Then it became normal. Then expected. Then unspoken. She remembered defending him to her friends. He's just figuring things out. Everyone moves at their own pace. He supports me emotionally. But support did not pay rent. Encouragement did not settle debts. Love did not replace effort. She realized she had married potential. Not character. Potential was exciting. It made patience feel noble. It made waiting feel like sacrifice with meaning. But character showed up daily. It carried weight. It worked even when tired. Cunnel had stopped showing up. In the morning, she prepared breakfast silently. Cunnel joined her, cheerful as usual. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking, she replied. About work. About us. He laughed lightly. Don't overthink. Things will fall into place. She looked at him and saw the problem clearly now. He believed time would fix what effort refused to touch. As she left for work, she felt something shift again, not breaking, not exploding, just settling into truth. She still loved him. But love alone could no longer carry the weight of two adults. And for the first time, she wondered what would happen if she stopped trying to be enough for both of them. The bank hall was quiet in the way only serious places were. Sade sat upright in the chair opposite the loan officer, her handbag resting neatly on her lap, her face calm even though her heart was not. The air conditioner hummed softly. Papers lay spread across the desk, statements, projections, repayment schedules filled with small numbers that carried heavy consequences. "This is a short-term facility," the officer said, adjusting his glasses. "High interest. Strict timelines." Sade nodded. "I understand. You will need to be very disciplined." "I already am," she replied. The officer studied her for a moment, then slid the final document forward. "Sign here." Her pen hovered for a second. She thought of the rent due in 3 weeks. The truck repairs. The supplier demanding upfront payment. The lifestyle they maintained, quiet luxury that hid the strain beneath it. She signed. Just like that, the weight doubled. When she left the bank, the sun was bright, but she felt cold. She sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine. Her phone buzzed with a message from Kunal. "What are you making for dinner?" She stared at the screen. No question about her day. No curiosity. Just expectation. That evening, Kunal slept early. Sade stayed awake, laptop open, recalculating routes, negotiating rates, planning how to stretch the loan without snapping under it. She worked with the desperation of someone holding a wall together with bare hands. At midnight, she finally lay down. Kunal shifted in his sleep and wrapped an arm around her waist. "Everything will be fine," he murmured, half asleep. She did not respond. The next weeks passed in a blur. The loan money moved quickly: fuel, repairs, staff salaries, delayed customs fees. It disappeared into problems before it ever felt like relief. Each day, the interest grew quietly, like something alive. Kunal noticed nothing. He continued his routine. Woke late. Ate well. Watched television. Made calls that sounded important but led nowhere. Occasionally he complained about boredom. "This house is too quiet," he said one afternoon. "You should hire more staff so you're not always tired." She forced a smile. At night, she lay awake, listening to his steady breathing, calculating repayment dates in her head. If one client delayed payment, everything would collapse. If one truck broke down again, she would fall behind. The pressure sat on her chest like a physical thing. One evening, as rain hit the windows hard, she stood alone in the kitchen, holding her phone. The bank's reminder message glowed on the screen, polite, firm, unavoidable. Kunal walked in, drying his hair with a towel. "Power is strong today," he said happily. "I'm going to watch a movie." She nodded. He did not see the message. He did not see her hands trembling slightly as she locked her phone. He did not see the fear she swallowed every day to keep their life smooth. That night, as he slept deeply beside her, Sade stared into the darkness and realized something terrifying. If she failed, they would both fall. But if she succeeded, Kunal would never change. And the loan he never knew about was slowly teaching her a truth she had avoided for too long: carrying someone in silence does not save them. It only teaches them how comfortable your suffering can be. Kunal announced the news casually, as if it were nothing special. They were eating dinner, rice gone cold, television murmuring in the background, when he cleared his throat and said, "I might be traveling to Port Harcourt next week." Sade paused mid-bite. "For what?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. He smiled, That familiar confident smile that once made her heart race. An opportunity. Oil and gas related. A friend connected me. Her chest tightened. Port Harcourt. Work. Opportunity. Real words. When did this happen? She asked. Recently, he replied vaguely. I didn't want to talk about it until it was solid. She studied his face carefully. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed for someone whose life was about to change. But she was tired of doubt, tired of carrying everything alone. What kind of role? She asked. Operations. Strategy. Something big, he said. They like my ideas. Her heart betrayed her logic. Hope rose quietly, dangerously. How long will you be there? She asked. Maybe a few weeks. If it goes well, I might even relocate temporarily. Relocate. The word echoed in her mind. That night, as Cunnel slept, Sade lay awake again, but this time, her thoughts felt lighter. If he worked, even a little, the pressure would reduce. The loan. The deadlines. The fear. Maybe this was it. The next day, she helped him pack. She ironed his clothes. She reminded him to carry his documents. She transferred money to his account for expenses. She told herself it was investment, not sacrifice. At the bus terminal in Djibouti, Cunnel hugged her tightly. Trust me, he whispered. Everything will change. She nodded, holding on longer than usual. As the bus pulled away, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in years, she imagined a future where she was not the only one pushing. She returned to her office energized, working late with renewed strength. In Port Harcourt, Cunnel checked into a modest hotel. The first day passed quietly. He made a few calls, walked around, ate well. The second day, he met his friend, a man who talked a lot but promised little. They sat in a bar discussing connections, drinking, laughing. No rush, the man said. These things take time. Cunnel nodded. Days turned into a week. Cunnel called Sade often. They are impressed, he said. I'm attending meetings, he said. Things are aligning, he said. Sade listened, believing because she needed to. Back in Lagos, pressure continued. The bank reminders became firmer. Clients delayed payments. One truck broke down again. Still, she told herself, hold on. Cunnel is trying. In Port Harcourt, Cunnel slept late, woke late, and spent long afternoons waiting for calls that never came. He told himself patience was strategy. One evening, Sade called him. When will you start work? She asked gently. Soon, he replied quickly. You know how these companies are. She closed her eyes. Hope flickered, but weaker now. What she did not know was that the promise keeping her strong was already fading. The opportunity she was counting on was built on nothing solid. And once again, Cunnel's dreams were floating freely while Sade stood firmly beneath them, holding everything up, unaware that the illusion was already beginning to crack. Sade did not plan the trip. The decision came quietly, late one night, as she sat alone in her office staring at a message from the bank reminding her of the next repayment date. Her chest felt tight. Cunnel had been in Port Harcourt for nearly 3 weeks, yet nothing concrete had changed. No contract. No start date. No proof, only words. She booked the flight without telling him. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. She needed truth more than reassurance. Port Harcourt welcomed her with heavy air and grey skies. As the taxi moved through the city, she watched oil company buildings pass by, tall and serious, filled with people who looked like they were going somewhere. She wondered where Cunnel fit into this world he spoke so confidently about. She checked into a hotel near GRA, dropped her bag, and called him. "I'm in town," she said simply. There was a pause on the line. "In Port Harcourt?" he asked. "Yes." Another pause. Longer. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quickly. "I wanted to surprise you," she replied. "I thought we could have dinner. You can show me where you work." Silence. "I'm not around right now," he said. "Meetings." "Send me the address," she said. He cleared his throat. "It's not convenient today." That was when her heart sank. She ended the call calmly and left the hotel. She knew one address in Port Harcourt that Cunnel could never lie about, the hotel he had mentioned casually during one of their calls. She asked the taxi driver to take her there. When they arrived, she felt a strange mix of dread and clarity. Cunnel was there. Not in a suit. Not rushing to a meeting. He sat by the pool in slippers and shorts, laughing with two men she did not recognize. Bottles sat on the table. The laughter was careless. Easy. This was not a man under pressure. This was not a man chasing opportunity. She stood still, watching. Hours of stories collapsed in her mind. Meetings. Impressions. Alignment. All of it evaporated in the heat of that afternoon. Cunnel saw her. The smile on his face disappeared. "Sade," he said, standing abruptly. She walked toward him slowly. "So this is where you work," she said. The men looked away awkwardly. One of them picked up his drink and stood. "We'll give you space," he muttered. Cunnel swallowed. "I can explain." She laughed softly. "Please do." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit. Let's talk." "No," she said. "I want to hear it standing." He rubbed his hands together. "Things didn't go as planned. The opportunity is still there, but it's slow." "And your days?" she asked. "What do you do all day?" He hesitated. She waited. "I network," he said finally. "I maintain relationships." "With alcohol?" she asked. He looked away. Something inside her broke, not loudly, not violently, but completely. Later that evening, alone in her hotel room, the truth replayed itself over and over. Cunnel had not been unlucky. He had been comfortable. While she fought deadlines and debt, he waited for life to improve itself. While she borrowed money in silence, he borrowed time without shame. He had lied easily. And she had believed willingly. That night, she did not cry. She felt something colder than sadness. Clarity. By morning, she knew this was not a phase. It was a pattern. And patterns do not change because of hope. They change because of consequences. She checked out of the hotel and booked the next flight back to Lagos, carrying a truth heavier than any loan she had taken. Cunnel called repeatedly. She did not answer. For the first time, she was not interested in explanations. She had finally seen how he lived when no one was watching. And it changed everything. Sade thought the truth had already revealed itself in Port Harcourt. She was wrong. It happened 2 days after she returned to Lagos. The house felt unusually quiet, not peaceful, but hollow. Cunnel had not come back yet. He claimed he needed a few more days to sort things out. She did not argue. She did not insist. Something inside her had gone numb. That afternoon, her phone rang from an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it. "Hello," she said finally. There was hesitation on the other end. Then a woman spoke. Her voice was calm, careful, almost polite. "Is this Sade Adebayo?" "Yes. My name is Agba. I'm calling from Port Harcourt." Sade sat down slowly. I think we need to talk about your husband." Silence filled the room. "How did you get my number?" Sade asked. Connell saved it in his phone as home. The woman replied softly. I'm sorry if this is inappropriate, but I felt you deserved to know. Sade closed her eyes. Know what? She asked. Another pause. That Connell has been staying with me. The words landed gently, but they crushed. I don't mean like that, Agba added quickly. There is nothing romantic between us. Sade did not respond. He told me you were separated, the woman continued. He said you were focusing on your career and that things were complicated. Sade laughed quietly. Complicated? For how long? She asked. Almost 3 weeks. Sade's hand tightened around the phone. Why are you calling me now? She asked. Because I realized something was wrong, Agba said. Connell doesn't work. He doesn't go anywhere. He talks about ideas, about plans, but every day, I pay for food. I pay for fuel. I pay for everything. Sade felt dizzy. He said it was temporary, Agba continued. He said once his deal came through, he would repay me. Sade leaned back against the couch. How much? She asked quietly. There was a pause. Too much, the woman said. Enough for me to start feeling foolish. Sade swallowed. She understood now. Connell had not just escaped responsibility. He had transferred it. From her to another woman. Not with love. Not with romance. But with comfort. Agba was not a mistress. She was a replacement provider. He eats well, the woman continued. He sleeps well. He laughs. He says you are strong and independent, that you don't need him like other women do. Sade's chest tightened. I am calling you, Agba said, because I don't want to be part of this anymore. I am not angry. I just feel used. Sade took a deep breath. So do I, she replied. They ended the call quietly. Sade sat alone for a long time afterward. This betrayal cut differently. It was not passion. It was not desire. It was not infidelity the way people expected it to be. It was worse. Connell had learned a system. Find a woman. Tell her stories. Live off her patience. And when pressure rose, move to the next. That evening, Connell called. Sade, I'll be back soon, he said cheerfully. Things are settling. She did not confront him. Not yet. She realized something important in that moment. Connell did not feel guilt because he did not see dependence as wrongdoing. To him, being carried was normal. And she had trained him well. As night fell over Lagos, Sade stood by the window and looked at the city lights. Cars moved. Lives moved. People struggled forward. She whispered to herself, I am not competing with another woman. She was competing with Connell's comfort. And comfort had been winning for far too long. Sade returned to Lagos on a late evening flight. The city greeted her with its familiar hum, honking cars, neon lights flickering across high-rise buildings, the restless energy that never allowed anyone to pause. She had always loved Lagos, but tonight it felt heavier, almost oppressive. Connell was at the airport to pick her up, smiling that same effortless smile, looking as if the past few weeks had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She approached the car, suitcase in hand, and felt a strange mixture of anger and exhaustion. Welcome back, Connell said, opening the door for her. Thank you, she replied coldly, sliding in. The drive home was quiet. Connell tried small talk, stories about Port Harcourt, the people he met, promises of contracts, but she did not respond. Her mind replayed the call with Agba, the sight of him lounging by the pool, and the realization that he had spent weeks being cared for by another woman while she had carried everything alone. By the time they reached their Lekki home, something inside her had shifted. She stepped out of the car and moved through the gate silently. The house smelled of faint air freshener and stale cigarettes, his usual combination. Connell followed, humming a tune as if nothing had happened. Inside, Sade went straight to her room, ignoring his attempts at conversation. Connell leaned against the doorframe. Are you upset? He asked casually. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. Her gaze was calm, but it carried weight. Upset isn't the word, she said slowly. I'm disappointed. Connell raised his eyebrows. Disappointed? Why? She let out a quiet laugh, not of amusement, but of disbelief. Because I finally see you. And the man I married, the man I believed in, isn't here anymore. He frowned. Sade, I've always had dreams. You know that. I'm trying. You're trying in words, she interrupted sharply. Effort is missing. Responsibility is missing. Respect is gone. Kunal blinked. Respect? What do you mean? I mean that I can't respect a man who lies easily, who moves through life expecting others to carry him, who has no shame in using people, even the ones who care about him most. Her voice softened slightly. I love you, Kunal. I do. But love alone isn't enough. Not anymore. He looked away, uneasy, as if he had heard a language he had never understood. For the first time, Sade felt the power dynamic shift. She was no longer simply the supportive wife. She was someone who had seen the truth, and truth demanded change. That night, Kunal went to bed expecting the usual affection, the soft words, the reassurance. Sade lay beside him but made no move to close the distance. Her body was there, but her respect, the invisible glue that had held their marriage together, had vanished. And without respect, love could not operate the same way. Morning came. Kunal woke, stretching lazily, expecting a familiar routine. Sade was already dressed for work. She walked past him without a word. Kunal called her name, tentatively. Sade, are you? She shook her head. Not now. He watched her leave, realization slowly creeping into his mind. This was not anger. This was not punishment. This was quiet withdrawal. Respect dies silently. It leaves no warning, no alarm. And when it dies, everything changes. For Sade, the shift was clear. She would continue to love, but she would no longer carry the weight of a man who refused to stand. And for Kunal, a subtle fear began to grow, one that no dream, no promise, and no comfort could erase. The house in Lekki felt different. Not empty, but strangely still. The usual hum of laughter, the polite arguments, the soft touches between husband and wife all had vanished. It was as if the walls themselves had learned to hold their breath. Sade moved through the house like a ghost. She prepared meals, managed calls from suppliers, and checked on shipments, but she did so without the usual warmth or chatter. Kunal watched from the living room, reclining on the sofa, the television murmuring softly. He noticed the quiet at first, but he misread it. He believed peace had returned, that their marriage had settled into a comfortable routine. No one yelled. No one demanded. No one complained. He smiled to himself. Finally, life was easy. Dinner is ready, Sade said one evening, her voice calm, almost distant. Thank you, Kunal replied. I'll come in a moment. Moments passed. He walked into the dining room and found her sitting alone, picking at the food. Why aren't you eating? He asked casually. Sade looked up, her expression neutral. I'm not hungry. Kunal shrugged and sat beside her, taking food for himself. Conversation was minimal. Small, careful remarks about logistics, supplies, or the weather, but nothing personal. No laughter. No teasing. No soft touches. The silence in the house grew. Kunal, accustomed to comfort, assumed the quiet was peace. He relished the absence of nagging, the lack of confrontation. He lounged longer, stretched farther, and spoke less. Meanwhile, Sade observed. Every casual comment, every lazy smile, every leisurely step reminded her of what had been lost. The man she loved, the man she had believed in, had retreated behind excuses, lies, and ease. Now, she moved around him without expectation. Love remained, but it no longer dictated her energy. Weeks passed. Sade's routine became methodical. Kunal's routine became leisurely. She handled all pressing matters, all decisions, all planning. He observed, responded minimally, and enjoyed the absence of confrontation. At night, Sade lay in bed while Kunal snored lightly beside her. She did not reach for him. He did not reach for her. The mattress between them became a symbol not of comfort, but of distance. One evening, as Kunal poured himself wine in the kitchen, he thought aloud, "This silence is nice, isn't it?" Sade, standing by the window, did not turn. Her back was straight, her posture deliberate. "It is," she said softly, but without warmth. He smiled, satisfied, thinking their marriage had found balance. But he did not realize the truth. Silence was not peace. Silence was absence. Absence of expectation, absence of respect, absence of engagement. And without presence, no marriage could thrive. For Kunal, silence was comfort. For Sade, silence was survival. And as days blended into nights, the quiet stretched on, heavy and unbroken, teaching a lesson neither of them could ignore, though only one truly understood its weight. The first email arrived on a Thursday morning. Sade sat at her office desk in Sayulia, exhausted from another sleepless night, scrolling through messages, invoices, and reminders. One subject line caught her eye: Enugu Logistics Expansion Proposal, urgent response needed. Curiosity piqued, she clicked. The email outlined a partnership opportunity with a major distribution company in Enugu, one that would allow her to expand her business to southeastern Nigeria. The numbers were impressive: guaranteed contracts, long-term clients, and operational support that could multiply her revenue within months. Her heart raced. Not because she had not faced opportunities before, but because this one carried independence. Real independence. No more loans that made her stomach churn, no more carrying the weight of someone else's comfort while managing her own survival. She reread the proposal carefully, calculating logistics, staff deployment, and potential profit. Her mind worked through solutions with the precision of a seasoned strategist. It was all possible, but it required immediate action. And most importantly, Kunal could not know, at least, not yet. She did not need to hide it maliciously. She simply needed space to make the first move without his interference, without his vision or ideas complicating things. The last few weeks had taught her that words and promises were cheap. Actions had to be hers alone. Sade leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She pictured the city of Enugu, bustling markets, busy roads, an economy growing faster than people expected. It was far from Lagos, far from the soft comfort of Lekki's high-rise luxury, far from the man who refused to act while she carried them both. By late afternoon, she had made her decision. She would fly to Enugu to meet the partners, finalize the agreement, and secure the first contracts. Kunal would stay behind, as he always did, comfortable and unaware. That evening, at home, Kunal lounged lazily on the sofa, remote in hand. "You look busy," he commented casually, watching her check her emails and make notes. "I am," she said simply. "Some new clients. Things to prepare." Kunal grinned. "Don't overwork yourself. You've been carrying a lot, you know. I don't know how you do it." Sade smiled faintly. "I manage." He nodded and returned to the television, oblivious. Later that night, as Sade packed her bag for Enugu, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Not of luxury, not of comfort, not of someone else carrying her forward. This time, it was for her. She double-checked her documents, her flight tickets, and her business plan. She placed everything neatly in her bag. Kunal called from the living room. "Sade, are you flying out tomorrow?" She looked at him without flinching. "Yes." "That's sudden," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I have to go," she replied simply. "Some things need my attention." He nodded slowly, uncertain, and returned to the sofa. Sade realized that for the first time, she was moving without permission, without expectation, without compromise. The air in the house felt lighter, even as Kunal remained oblivious to the storm that was about to change everything. And as she closed the door behind her that night, she carried not just a suitcase, but a chance to reclaim the life she had been giving away silently for far too long. Kunal had never known hunger. Not the polite kind that comes and goes, easily managed by a soft meal or a warm bed. Not the mild discomfort that city life could momentarily erase with a snack. This was raw hunger, gnawing at his stomach and mind simultaneously, a relentless reminder that comfort could not follow him everywhere. It began in Agba, where he had arrived weeks earlier, hoping to start fresh. He believed his charm, his stories, and his confidence would open doors. But the city did not care for charm alone. The doors he knocked on stayed closed. Emails went unanswered. His calls were politely ignored. At first, he laughed it off, telling himself, this is just the beginning. But as the days passed, the laughter faded. He spent nights in cheap lodges, barely able to pay the rent. Meals became sporadic. Sometimes it was only bread, sometimes just water. He walked through crowded streets, watching traders and business people move with purpose, knowing that no one would stop for him. The world was not waiting for a man who depended on words and dreams. He faced rejection after rejection. Shops he approached for contracts or work laughed at his proposals. Employers refused interviews. Even his friends in the city found excuses, their smiles polite but distant. Kunal realized too late that he had no reputation here. Not the one he thought he had. Not the one he had carried in Lagos while Sade sustained them both. Hunger grew alongside shame. He could not call Sade. He could not borrow money. He had no backup. No safety net. No home he could lean on. And for the first time, he felt the weight of everything he had ignored: responsibility, effort, respect. One evening, he wandered into a crowded market, trying to find odd jobs. A street vendor offered him work carrying crates, but the payment was meager. Still, he accepted. By the time he finished, his hands were raw, his body exhausted, his pride crushed. As he sat on the curb, watching other men and women moving with purpose, he realized that love, loyalty, and charm had never fed him. Not once. He remembered Sade. Not with anger, not with blame, but with clarity. The woman who had carried their life, silently and without complaint, had taught him more through absence than he had ever learned through presence. Her departure had forced him to confront a truth he had spent years avoiding: survival required effort, not words. That night, lying on a wooden bench in the market square, Kunal faced himself in a way he never had. Hunger was teaching him lessons Sade's love had failed to instill. Patience, strategy, vision, none mattered if he could not act. And in that bitter, quiet moment, he understood that comfort had been the enemy. Dependence had been the cage. Hunger was cruel, but it was honest. And for the first time, Kunal knew that if he wanted to survive, he would have to rise, not for love, not for status, not for appearances, but for himself. For the first time, he feared failing alone. And that fear, sharper than any disappointment Sade had ever shown him, began to ignite something unfamiliar: action. Agba was relentless. The city moved fast, full of traders, artisans, and people who hustled with an urgency Kunal had never experienced. Streets buzzed with shouting vendors, motorcycles weaving between cars, and the hum of commerce that never paused. Here, no one cared about charm, promise, or ambition. Actions alone counted. Kunal had arrived with nothing but a backpack, a few naira, and the vague hope that his previous life, his words, his connections, his confidence would somehow follow him. He quickly realized how wrong he was. He wandered through Ariaria Market, watching men and women negotiate fiercely, weighing fabric with precision, counting bills carefully. No one waited for excuses. No one paused for dreams that were unbacked by work. The city did not know his name. He knocked on doors he thought might offer opportunity: small manufacturing companies, distributors, even offices that handled logistics, but every answer was polite, dismissive, or outright rejection. "We don't need anyone," they said. "Come back when you have experience." Experience. Not charm. Not vision. Not patience. Only experience. He tried odd jobs, carrying crates, helping load trucks, delivering parcels. Each day left him more exhausted than the last, physically and mentally. His hands blistered, his back ached, his pride shattered slowly with every no he faced. For weeks, he worked without a single reward beyond survival. He ate when he could afford it, slept wherever he found a place, and moved through the city like a shadow. People passed him without a second glance. A man of words became invisible in a world that only respected deeds. Late one evening, he sat on a curb near a busy junction, watching women balance goods on their heads, men count cash meticulously, and boys run errands with disciplined precision. The hum of the city pressed against him. He remembered Lagos, the luxury, the comfort, Sade covering everything for him. He realized how much he had depended on her: rent, food, status, approval. None of it mattered here. None of it. He clenched his fists. Excuses would not feed him. Dreams would not open doors. Words alone would not earn respect. The city was unforgiving. It did not know his name. It did not care about his past. And in that truth, harsh and absolute, Connell began to feel something he had never felt before: accountability. If he wanted a place here, he had to build it himself. Every crate carried, every delivery completed, every naira earned was a step toward redemption or failure. And for the first time, he understood that survival demanded more than ambition, it demanded action. No one would wait. No one would rescue him. The city rewarded only those who moved, who worked, who refused to rely on others' labor. Connell closed his eyes against the noise and grit, letting it sink in. This city did not care about promises. It did not reward excuses. And he could no longer hide behind anyone else's strength. For the first time in his life, he truly stood alone. Connell's hands ached in ways they never had before. He woke before sunrise, moving through the crowded streets of Agba with a sense of purpose that was entirely new. Sweat stung his eyes, blisters burned his palms, and each breath felt heavier than the last, but he could not stop. Survival had replaced ambition. Failure was no longer abstract, it was immediate, biting, and merciless. He spent mornings carrying crates of fabric through Ariaria market, balancing bundles larger than he had ever imagined, feeling the weight both physically and mentally. Merchants barked instructions, ignored apologies, and offered no patience. Here, the world did not reward charm. Here, it demanded work. By noon, his body screamed for rest, but he pushed on, delivering parcels, organizing shipments, and negotiating small fees with clients. He learned quickly: a mistake could cost money, a delay could cost respect, and respect, once lost, was nearly impossible to regain. At night, he returned to the small rented room he now called home. It smelled faintly of damp concrete and unwashed laundry, but he did not care. Sleep came in short bursts, punctuated by worry about the next day's work, payments, and surviving long enough to continue. For the first time, Connell understood the meaning of effort. Not the effortless confidence he had wielded in Lagos, nor the strategic patience he had used to justify doing nothing. This was raw, unavoidable, and personal. He thought of Sade often. Not in anger, not in longing, but in reflection. She had carried both their lives for years. She had fought deadlines, repaired mistakes, paid debts, and sustained comfort while he had remained comfortably inert. He had laughed, spoken, and promised. She had acted. Now, the tables had turned. One afternoon, as he organized a delivery of textiles, a young apprentice looked at him skeptically. "You're not used to this work, are you?" he asked bluntly. Connell's hands paused for a moment. Then he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held humility for the first time in years. "No," he admitted. "I'm learning." The apprentice nodded. "Good. Better to learn than to stay comfortable." The words stung, but he felt the truth behind them. Days blended into weeks. Each task he completed was a small victory. Each coin earned was a reminder that survival required sweat, persistence, and resilience, not words. Connell began to notice a change in himself. His body hardened. His mind sharpened. The world no longer felt like something to be admired from the sidelines, it demanded action, and he was forced to act. For the first time, he feared failure in a way that inspired him. Hunger, shame, and the raw pressure of necessity drove him forward. And deep inside, buried under exhaustion and humility, he realized something he had never understood before: life respected only those willing to rise when they had nowhere else to turn. Connell was rising. Not for ambition. Not for love. Not for comfort. But for survival. And survival, as he had learned too late in Lagos, was the only teacher powerful enough to demand change. Connell woke one morning to the smell of roasted plantains and diesel from nearby workshops, and something felt different. The deliveries he had coordinated over the past months were finally paying off. Payments were coming on time. Merchants were recognizing him, albeit grudgingly. The sweat and pain of the last weeks had begun to bear fruit. He had built small but tangible respect in Agba, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it truly meant to earn. He smiled to himself as he balanced boxes onto a waiting van, his muscles sore but steady. He had done this alone, without comfort, without support, without shortcuts. That evening, tired but hopeful, Kunal called Sade. He wanted to tell her about his progress, to finally show her that he was no longer the man who depended on others. He imagined her reaction, the relief, the pride, the warmth that once kept him safe in her love. But when he reached her number, there was no answer. A text followed. "I'm busy with the Enugu contracts. Things are moving fast here. We'll talk soon." Kunal stared at the screen, a tight knot forming in his chest. He returned to the memory of Lagos, the house, the quiet dinners, her soft eyes that once trusted him. He realized, painfully, that she had moved forward without him, carving a life that no longer needed his presence. She had survived, and in surviving, she had grown stronger, sharper, more independent. Progress tasted bitter now. He had spent years waiting, excusing himself, hiding behind words and dreams. And when he had finally acted, the woman who had carried both of them no longer waited. That night, Kunal lay on the simple mattress in his Agba room, thinking about every excuse he had made, every promise he had failed to keep. He had learned the hard way that life was unforgiving, that survival demanded effort, and that respect was earned, not given. Yet there was a hollow ache he could not fill. Sade was not angry, not in the way he had feared, but she was gone in the sense that mattered most. She had ceased to be the woman who waited, who softened life's burdens for him. She had moved on silently, efficiently, and without expectation. He closed his eyes, the weight of his late realization pressing heavily on him. Success had arrived, but it had arrived too late. The rewards of effort no longer aligned with the woman he once leaned on for comfort. Outside, the city of Agba hummed relentlessly, indifferent to the timing of personal awakenings. And inside, Kunal began to understand a truth he had never faced before. The world rewards those who act, but it does not wait for those who were once given everything without effort. The lesson was bitter. The growth was real. And Kunal, alone, finally felt the consequences of every year he had wasted. It was a quiet Thursday in Lekki when Kunal returned. He had traveled back from Agba, carrying not only the weight of months of labor but also the faint pride of finally standing on his own. His hands were calloused, his body hardened, his mind sharper than it had ever been. He had learned lessons that words could never teach, and survival had become his constant companion. But the moment he stepped into the familiar Lekki neighborhood, he felt a subtle tension in the air. The house that once felt like home now seemed different, organized, efficient, alive with movement. It was Sade's world, and it carried no trace of him in its rhythm. He rang the doorbell, rehearsing the words he would say. "I've changed. I've grown. I've earned my place." The door opened, and there she stood. Sade. Strong, poised, commanding in her presence. She looked at him carefully, not with warmth, but with measured curiosity. Her eyes, once soft and forgiving, now held quiet authority. "Kunal," she said, voice calm but firm. "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." He stepped in, noticing the subtle signs of her success, the contracts on her desk, the organized files, the way the house functioned as a machine of efficiency. "I thought we should talk," he said, trying to sound casual. She gestured for him to sit, but did not move from her spot. "We can talk," she replied, "but I need to be clear, things are different now." Kunal nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I know," he said quietly. They sat across from each other, the space between them heavy with unspoken history. He had grown, but so had she. Sade no longer needed the man who once depended entirely on her. She had built, survived, and thrived in his absence, and the power dynamic that once allowed him to coast had shifted irrevocably. "I've been busy," she began, expanding the business to Enugu and Owerri. "Contracts, staff, logistics. Things are moving faster than I expected." Kunal listened, a mix of pride and regret stirring within him. He had learned what it meant to work, to struggle, to earn, but she had done all that before he had, carving a life that no longer required him as it once had. He started, searching for the right words. "I've changed, Sade. I've worked. I've learned. I understand now. She studied him, expression unreadable. That's good, Colonel. I'm glad. But growth doesn't erase the past. And the distance between us isn't just about physical space. It's about what we've become. He nodded, realizing the truth. The years of laziness, the dependence, the lies all had created a chasm that no effort, no apology, and no regained skill could immediately bridge. Sade had become a force of her own making, and he had arrived too late to reclaim the role he once held. For the first time, he understood the painful elegance of timing. Effort, growth, and survival were meaningless if they came after the other person had already risen. They remained in silence for a long moment, each aware of the invisible barrier between them: power, independence, regret. Love was still present, faint and stubborn, but it no longer dictated the rules of their relationship. Respect, opportunity, and life itself had rewritten the terms. Colonel realized something he had never admitted before: he had been a passenger in life for too long. And now, even though he had begun to steer his own course, the woman he once depended on had set sail far ahead. The meeting ended without confrontation, without reconciliation, without resolution. And as Colonel left the house that night, the streets of Lekki stretching endlessly before him, he understood the hardest truth of all: sometimes, two people can love each other, but the paths they take, and the people they become, can place a distance no affection alone can cross. Colonel sat alone on the balcony of a small apartment he had rented in Lagos, the city lights stretching endlessly before him. The hum of traffic, the flickering neon signs, and the distant laughter of late-night revelers formed a backdrop to the storm inside his mind. He had survived hunger, humiliation, and the relentless grind of Agba. He had learned discipline, persistence, and responsibility. And yet, the question that haunted him now was far heavier than any physical labor he had endured: had he changed in time? Sade's absence lingered like a shadow he could not shake. She had moved forward without him, carved a life of strength and independence, and in doing so had shown him what it truly meant to act, to survive, to grow. He had finally arrived, stronger, wiser, more capable, but she was no longer waiting. The life he had once taken for granted, the woman he had relied on without effort, had evolved beyond the reach of his delayed transformation. He thought about all the excuses he had once lived behind, the comfort he had relied upon, and the lessons he had ignored. Could real change matter if it came after the one person it was meant to prove itself to had already moved on? Could survival, discipline, and effort mean anything if love and respect had quietly left the space where they had once existed? Colonel's hands shook slightly as he traced the railing in front of him. He realized that growth, no matter how genuine, could not rewind the past. It could not erase the months he had wasted, the dependence he had relied upon, or the betrayal, unintentional, yet real, he had lived through. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. Perhaps there was still a way to reclaim not the past, but a future. Perhaps the lessons he had learned could guide him toward redemption. But uncertainty lingered, sharp, unyielding, impossible to ignore. He closed his eyes, letting the city sounds wash over him. The thought returned again and again: had he truly changed, or had his transformation arrived too late to matter? As the wind brushed past, carrying the distant sound of Lagos life, Colonel whispered to himself, almost as a challenge, almost as a plea: is change ever meaningful if it comes too late? And with that, the story pauses, leaving the question hanging in the night, unanswered. What do you think, viewers? Can someone who learns too late ever truly make things right, or is timing everything in the end?